Good morning, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and today I'm going to be doing the different types of libertarians. This is an idea I got from the YAPMS, the YAP MS Discord server. That's the map app that I use for my forecasting model and for any of my individual forecasts. For example, Senate races, gubernatorial. I switched to that from 270 because it's a little bit better, honestly, and it allows me to do foreign elections and all that. Anyway, so somebody there suggested I do a list of the different types of libertarians, and I've got some notes here just to help me stay on track and all that. Before we get into it, just a few little things down in the comments. I want you to talk about, where you stand, politically speaking, like what's your ideology, that sort of thing, like within specifically, where you are. If you're a Republican, are you, a paleoconservative, or are you a neocon, that sort of thing. Because the truth is that even large parties will have differences in their groups. Anyway, so I'm gonna just kind of broadly go from right to left on the economic scale. I think as a guideline, that two axes political compass is a good guideline, but it's missing, a cultural aspect and, in my opinion, how wacky some of these things are. So we're going to start with the ANCAPs, the anarcho-capitalists. And basically their whole idea is that if you get rid of the state, you're going to have pure, unfettered, free markets. And it's kind of true, because you're not going to have, well, we'll get to that a little bit later on, but so they want pure free markets, no state, and the only real law they consider is the non-aggression principle, which is basically, in its simplest form, first, do not initiate harm. Then do whatever you want. And there's a lot of discussion on the libertarian right as to whether or not certain things violate the NAP, which is the abbreviation for the non-aggression principle. And anarcho-capitalists push it to its most extreme form in terms of, does it violate the NAP? Going down a little bit, we've got the Objectivists, and this group is inspired by Ayn Rand, and the whole idea is, serve yourself, live for yourself. There's no one better worth living for, and that altruism is a sin. You're free to do it, obviously, but it's why bother? Because begging hands and bleeding hearts will only cry out for more. Personally, I don't like this idea. I think it's the idea that kind of gives all of libertarianism, especially on the right, a really bad name. Because, well, it's saying, yeah, be selfish. That's good. That's good for society. That's good for you. I mean, there is some basis for that in traditional economic thought. I mean, Adam Smith wrote that the butcher and baker don't provide useful services to society because they think it's, they want to help others. They do it because they need to provide for themselves first and foremost. They just happen to have a useful skill, and their greed is what provides for society. Anyway, going down, we have the Hoppians, and they don't mind a state for the most part, though some will consider themselves ANCAPs. It's more of a philosophical belief and a lot would class them as minarchists. And if they do believe in a state, they believe in what's known as a night watchman state. Basically, the bare essentials of what's needed in order to keep a society functioning and keep a more totalitarian government from taking over. So, a basic police force, maybe ambulances, probably a fire department, and lastly, a robust national defense. The next group we have are the Friedmanites, and they are extremely free market, and they also are not really concerned about how much of a state there is, because they're focused almost entirely on economics, and they feel that if markets are free, eventually the people will become free. AKA, the freer the markets, the freer the people. And I do have a streak of this in my own personal philosophy. I mean, I've got a little bit of, each of the right wing ones in terms of some things I tend to believe. For example, I am a huge advocate for the non-aggression principle. I actually like Ayn Rand's writings. I disagree with her points about altruism, but she's a good storyteller. She's a bit long-winded. And yes, you should serve yourself first, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't help others. Anyway, we're going to go into what I believe is my own kind of area and where I personally sit. And that's classical liberalism. Basically, not all government is evil, the evil spawn of Satan. Just most of it is. We think that there is some level of regulation that might be necessary in commerce and trade. But again, most of it is bad, and we want local authorities to be the ones to do that. Again, we don't hate all taxation. We do think all taxation is theft, but we also think some of it may unfortunately be necessary in a society in order to keep it running. Basically a similar philosophy to what was going on during the American Revolution. So think Jefferson and Madison. Think less Hamilton, by the way. Hamilton was a filthy statist. We don't like federal banking, or when I say federal banking, sorry, I meant national banking. So we don't like the Federal Reserve. We don't like any of the national banks of the United States. And we're more focused on, from a cultural standpoint, are you hurting anyone? We don't believe in, actually making victimless crimes. We don't even consider them a crime if it's victimless. But yeah, so next group we're going to move into is the American Libertarian Party, which favors a little bit more central authority than, say, classical liberals. And this is because a lot of them are former Republicans or are Republicans who just like a little weed. And most of it's changing in the Republican Party, so this is less true, but it also included Republicans who were not big fans of the anti-gay marriage and the other non-LGBT friendly policies that the Republicans at one point held. This is slightly changing because the Republicans are moving more towards being friendly towards the LGBT community. But pretty much it was a Republican platform, but with decriminalization and let the gays be gay. It's cool. So moving on to Lib Dems, this is kind of the British version of the American Libertarian Party to a degree, but they are very ambiguous. They don't really have any strong positions on really anything. They're neither truly free market nor command economy. Uh, they are in favor of individual liberties for the most part, but they're kind of still centrist in a lot of ways. And honestly, I would say they're centrists, and they're complete. They are a complete joke. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the Lib Dems. Then we've got the Mutualists, who are they're a bit on the wacky side of things. They want to abolish currency, but they don't want to do what communists do and make everything communally held. They want a barter system, because supposedly it's more pure and currency doesn't matter, and currency has no inherent value, even if it's a representative currency. And some argue they're, less in favor of state, but most don't object to a government so long as they allow commerce, but also don't prevent, but also do some stuff to have like a safety net or something. Mutualism it's just weird, in my opinion. Then we've got anarcho-primitivism, and this is basically, the most anarchist position you can have, but because they believe in such a primitive society, they are neither capitalist nor communist. And that's mostly because, at the end of the day, when you have such primitive technology that the type that they're talking about, you can't be either because there's no real way to store wealth. Communism and capitalism really came about because humanity gained the ability to store wealth in the form of storing grain. Once that happened, you could actually build a society, and these things actually mattered. So anarcho-primitivists want to go all the way back to before society was a thing. I find them a bit wacky, but they exist. They exist. Then we've got Anarchosyndicalism. And for a better explanation that I could ever give, go read Noam Chomsky. And basically the ideal is there's no state, but with corporations, but there's redistribution. I'm trying to figure out how it can work, because to me it seems like it's just I really don't get it. I think it's a bit wacky too, but nowhere near as wacky as the anarcho-primitivists. So moving on to the anarcho-communists. This is Karl Marx's original goal, and they want a communist society, a communal society, but with no state. Which I think is a bit wishful thinking. I don't honestly think it's possible, and I really don't think it's doable, simply because if you're redistributing, you have to have a state. If you are controlling things, you have to have a state. Plus, it always winds up never going to the less government end, because Marx envisioned having to create a vast authoritarian state in order to implement communism, and slowly deregulating it and getting rid of that state. But, what they say about power, and those in power just never want to give it up. So I don't think it's realistically achievable the way Marx envisioned. But I also don't think it's realistically achievable the way socialists claim it's possible. Because the original distinction between communism and socialism was socialists wanted to use the existing structures, democracy and all that, in order to achieve a communist society, whereas communists wanted to violently overthrow everyone, implement a massive state, and then get rid of the government. Well, and we'll get to that in a bit as to why I don't think it's really possible to be anarchist and also communist. Because in order to really enforce this far left wing of an opinion, you need not only a state, but you need to be a little authoritarian, because without that, you're not going to keep everyone on board. And most people are going to leave, especially the ones who have something to lose. And then you've got a bunch of people with nothing, and they have nothing to redistribute. So, yeah. So, moving on to the Social Democrats. And I've separated them from democratic socialism because there really are two different ideologies, though here in the United States they get mixed up and confused. Social democracies would include, say, the Nordic states. They claim to be capitalists, and they are, for the most part. They allow businesses to grow and succeed and all that. They just heavily regulate and tax them, and they also tax their citizens extremely highly. And these governments implement a vast social safety net. Because, well, they want to. They want to implement a vast social safety net, and they want to do this in order to protect people and all sorts of altruistic things, They try to follow the ideals of the French Revolution of liberty, fraternity, equality, and pardon my poor French, but as we would translate it here in the United States, liberty, brotherhood, and equality. They want people to be equal, both in terms of how society treats them, but also in terms of economic status. I think the problem is they're focusing too much on equality of outcome and rather than equality of opportunity. So moving on to democratic socialism, it is the idea of socialism, but through democratic processes, meaning you get a socialist state through democracy. You get socialist policies through democracy. My problem with this is what happens when people start realizing that this socially controlled and this socially controlled industries and socially controlled businesses just doesn't work because there's too many moving parts and the average person can't really be expected to, and sorry about the phone going off, can't really be expected to understand all of this. So you have to have a government, and all of a sudden government gains more and more power because they want more and more power. And then at the end of the day, when people start realizing, hey, this isn't what we voted for, and they start saying, you need to give more power back to us, the government's going to say no, and they're going to start shutting things down, and they're going to become more and more authoritarian, more and more totalitarian. So I'm not entirely sure this is a workable ideology, but it exists. There are people who believe in it, and I'm sure someone who's on the left would say similar things about right-wing versions of libertarianism. And the last one I'm going to talk about is socialism, which makes no qualms about the fact that they have totalitarian tendencies. But they like to be libertarian until someone starts challenging their rule. And that's kind of why I don't even really want to consider true, socialists to be in the libertarian quadrant. But most of them are, because they don't have problems with people for, what they like to, do in their spare time. They don't care what goes on in two consenting adults' bedrooms. They really don't. They don't care what happens They don't care if you use drugs. They don't really care about a lot of stuff that, true totalitarians would. So I'll give them the pass just for the sake of argument, but they are kind of on notice because at the end of the day, if people start challenging their rule or their way of doing things, well, they get sent to gulag. Anyway, that's kind of basically it. Now that I'm at the end of the video, I want to talk a little bit about some other stuff I'm going to be doing. Tomorrow, I'm going to release a political soapbox on Medicare for All, specifically Elizabeth Warren and her Medicare for All plan, because it's the most fleshed out one. And mostly I'm going to be talking about the cost and the practicality of it all. And whether or not it would actually reduce costs for healthcare while maintaining the same level of quality. Because America does have one of the highest qualities of healthcare in the world. In addition, the YAP MS Discord, a few of us on voice chat have regularly gotten together and done some Cards Against Humanity games, and I'm tempted to, because I did record a few of them, I'm tempted to actually release those as a video, or as a video series, because I think it'd be good content and it's funny, and I've actually watched a few of them and I was laughing my rear end off even though I had participated. I think it'd be good content and something y'all would enjoy. And I'm also, there's a game called The Political Process, and I'm tempted to do that one and try and win elections and try and do, play the campaign, but, through, with my own personal beliefs and all of that stuff. So, yeah, I might actually go ahead and do that. So, just let me know in the comments what y'all think about that. Whether or not I should do the Cards Against Humanity games and release those. Release the videos that I have of those, and whether or not I should play that political process game, because it's probably the most fleshed out political game I've seen. There are a few minor gripes I have about it, but overall it's pretty good. Anyway, I want to thank you all for watching. Have a nice day. I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy. Bye-bye.